Let's get chilly. Hello and welcome back to Let's Chill, the official, unofficial Minnesota Wind Chill, Minnesota Strike podcast. I'm Jeff.
I'm Jay.
And I'm Kane.
And today we are doing something that has never been done in the history of this podcast. We are recapping 2 Minnesota losses in one weekend. It is crazy. The last year, of course, the Minnesota Strike were perfect 6-0 up until championship weekend, and the Minnesota Wind Chill have been almost perfect at home for the last 3 seasons. They've lost at least one to Chicago, and I think that might be the only loss they've taken at home. Again, you can fact check me, you can correct me on that, but they've been nearly perfect. If not that one, they've lost maybe 2. So it's kind of a tough weekend. It's tough to kind of put on a happy face and talk about the Wind Chill and Strike, but we're gonna try to do that in these next, hour or less. So, before we get into it, of course, Kane's gonna kick us off with some stall count trivia.
Oh yeah.
Is Kane able to share his screen?
I cannot share my screen.
All right, Ken.
Do you want me to just to read it out?
No, you can do it now.
Oh, hang on.
Okay.
Host now.
Share full screen slideshow. All right. Stall count trivia presented by Kane. Question number 1. How many undefeated teams are left in the PUL as of today? Is it A, 2, B, 3, C, 4, or D, 6?
I feel like we gotta go with C4.
I gotta go A2.
2, unfortunately, it is 3. There are 3 undefeated teams. I know which 3 they are, and I'm blanking off the top of my head. We're gonna keep the trivia going. How many winless teams are there? Don't.
Ooh. A2.
All right.
Two.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
Pretty sure it's 2.
It is 2. There are 2 winless teams left.
I actually knew that one.
There. That's funny. Yes, there are 2 winless teams. I'm for those of you who don't know, I'm copying the trivia questions from last week. Who is Minnesota's player of the game from Saturday's home game?
Read these answers out loud.
Oh, A, Jordan Taylor, B, Greg Cousins, C, Tristan Vandermortel, or D, The Wind.
So the Minnesota player of the game was Greg Cousins, but the Pittsburgh player of the game was The Wind.
This is true. Both of these are true. Anyway.
Nice little flip there.
Thank you all for tuning in to Stall Count Trivia. Perhaps the player of the game is a good segue into the game itself. Maybe start with some of the good.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool to see Greg Cousins, kind of in vintage Greg Cousins form. Well, before we get too much into the nitty gritty, just a quick recap for those who might have missed the game or want to recap. The Wind Chill did drop their home opener to the Pittsburgh Thunderbirds 16-15, which is very unexpected, I think, by just about everybody. I think, honestly, we can safely say even the Pittsburgh Thunderbirds probably didn't expect it. It was a crazy windy day at Seafoam Stadium. That was definitely not the only factor that went into this loss. We can't just blame it on the wind, but that was definitely a factor. The Thunderbirds were also playing in the same wind. Yeah, lots of downsides, and we're gonna touch on some of those. But right, Kane, I starting off on a positive note. There were some great plays and great players. Greg Cousins was one of them. He definitely led with, I believe, plus minus in the third quarter, fourth quarter. I saw he had plus minus a 4, and I don't know how that changed at the end of the game, but yeah, there were a couple standout players. Who else? I'm eating pizza right now. I'm eating dinner.
I mean, some other standout players. Noah Hansen, on the field a lot yesterday. I don't actually know how many points played he had, but it was quite a bit.
Yeah, I think he had 2 blocks, right?
Yeah, I mean, as of right now, he has 5 blocks on the season, so he's got the second most.
Okay, I actually like that you brought that up because I was going to bring this up too in a different context of Thomas Schopp. Thomas Schopp also has 5 blocks on the season. I think there's one more player who has 5. they are tied for second most blocks on the team. And I believe Matt Rader has the most blocks on the team this season, which is just kind of like a fun stat line, fun storyline to watch as we go. I mean, again, you got Matt Rader, who's kind of this like unexpected addition to the team. I know that we wanted to get him on a couple years ago. It didn't happen. So he's kind of making a name for himself. We've got Noah Hansen, who we've kind of known he's been waiting in the wings. He's able to make a name for himself. And now we've got the rookie Thomas Schopp, like right in there, right in the thick of it with 5 blocks too. So that's super exciting. And yeah, I think they all made an impact on Saturday.
Yeah. Oh, just to clarify, Jeff, Greg Cousins finished the game with the highest plus minus at 5.
Mm.
The next highest was Pete Sicardi from Pittsburgh with 4. So
Good to know.
Yeah, I think my only comment on like the only player I would add to that list, I guess, would be Matt Johnson, which is funny enough is another player that we were on the lookout for this year and also is a new addition to the roster.
Mhm.
And I think that speaks to kind of the Winchell's depth a little bit, which is obviously something that we had to look to yesterday because, I mean, we were missing 2 pretty standout players on D line alone. And just we already know about the absences with some of the college students and stuff like that. So
Yep.
I think that there were some definite highlights and some good things to take away from that game for sure.
Yeah. Talking about the people who they were missing, like the Winchell were missing a lot of throwers, especially. They were without Josh Klain. They were without Sam Berglund, who's been injured. They were without Will Brandt, Gordon Larson, Paul Krennic. Like they really were. They were the kind of that scrappy next man up team, like we've been talking about. And we've talked about all last season too. I don't know if that's an excuse though. Again, like I think they've done this before. They've done this with wind. They've done this, shorthanded without a lot of throwers, and we've seen people step up. I think Tristan Van Martell does a good job stepping up as a playmaker. I think Jordan Taylor does as well. And they just couldn't quite piece it together on Saturday, which again was really unexpected, even given all these factors.
Yeah, it's
this game reminds me a little bit of that first game against Chicago last season, where it was Minnesota had a doubleheader that weekend. And they ended up losing to Chicago. I want to say it was like 12-16. It was like a 4-point loss.
Mm.
And it was sort of a similar situation to this. It was earlier in the season. It was a game where we wanted them to win. We weren't expecting them to win, but they were playing shorthanded. It was early in the season. All these newer players hadn't stepped up and like fit into these roles quite yet.
Mm-hmm.
And yesterday we saw like, oh, these newer players were stepping up and fitting into these roles. And it wasn't a 12-16 loss. It was a 15-16 loss. So I think, that first game against Chicago last year, we saw like, oh man, these new guys, or these players that don't play all that much, like they really need to step up. And this year we're seeing like, oh, they did step up. They just haven't stepped up to that next level quite yet.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair comparison. I actually appreciate that. I got some positive spin on it. I will say, I don't know if it's fair to compare the Thunderbirds to the Union. Like again, just to be fair, like those are different caliber teams, and when you're at home versus they were at Chicago, right? Like again, I'm not trying to be like that pessimistic person, but I think there are differences, but I also agree that like they're making progress, and there's a lot to look forward to, and they did a good job at filling in those blanks when they needed to, for sure.
all right.
I
I don't
think
want the listeners to think that we're just gonna not talk about everything else though that happened in
yeah,
that game. I think one thing that I wanted to say about it, just like while you guys were talking there, it did not feel like there were any playmakers. And that's what was really frustrating was because even though we had a lot of really good performances, it didn't feel like there were any that were all that impactful or like had enough playmaking ability. And
mhm.
again, to Jay's point, like I understand that it wasn't a blowout game, but I mean, it was a bad game. It wasn't close because we pieced it together. It was close because thank God Pittsburgh didn't piece it together, basically.
Yeah.
So
I think
and that's not to like take away from the team, obviously, hopefully everyone on the team who's listening knows that like my criticism levied is not to be taken. Like, listen to your coaches, listen to Feldman. Don't listen to the three guys on the pod.
Hmm.
But you know
I
what?
think
That wasn't the cleanest game, and we can say that.
well, and that shows in their stats. Their turnovers. They had 28 turnovers in the game last night or Saturday. In the last two games combined, they had 29. So they basically doubled the amount of turnovers of the season in a single game. Like again, like that's an ugly stat that we can look at and say, yeah, that was not a good game. Um,
Especially because I feel like they've been having fewer turnovers this season than they
yes.
were last year. And yeah, Saturday's game looked like a little bit more like last season's and 2 seasons ago, where it was throwing away a couple of key moments.
Yeah, I think they were absolutely not chilly. Like if we're gonna be cute about it, like they weren't chilly. They were looking too deep. Like their hucks, I don't have the hucks up. I think they're 25% on hucks, um, which
Yeah,
like
three
is
three for
not.
12.
And I think Thunderbirds were like 36%, which I mean again that's higher. Like Thunderbirds were landing those hucks, um, but again, like it just didn't seem like they were adapting very well. Noah Hansen mentioned in our post-game interview that we accidentally filmed in slow-mo, and I could not figure out how to reverse that. Noah Hansen mentioned field positioning really hurt the team. How they're off the poles, like pole defense wasn't great. Which ironically in the clip that I'm going to share, pole defense was great. This whole clip is perfect. But overall, the course of the game, like they were not setting up well. They were not covering the right cutters at the right time. It just like again, it just didn't feel like a cohesive team. It just looked like a different wind chill team. And yeah, it was weird.
I kind of feel almost the opposite of that. I felt like their defense was doing exactly what it needed to do. The defense was generating a lot of high stall count situations, maybe some that were 7 seconds, but we can give people some leeway
Yeah.
there. They're
Yeah,
generating a
four
lot of
seconds
high
were.
stall, a lot of high stall situations, a lot of good blocks, a lot of good pressure. They did force Pittsburgh to have some throwaways. That wasn't because of the wind. That was because
Yeah.
of no one to throw to. I do
I
think
think
that almost to the opposite again of what Kane was saying, where there was no playmakers. I felt like everybody was trying to be the playmaker. Everyone was trying to be the difference maker, and they were playing a little bit again unchilly. They were playing too
yeah.
quick. They were trying to like take that deep look too fast.
But I think like again, not to like, contradict you and stuff, but like one, defense only put 4 break points up the entire game, and two of them were the first 2 points of the game. So again, defense might have been forcing a lot of turnovers, but they weren't securing the breaks after that. Um, and again, like it was just a high turnover game. Two, with the playmakers, I'll say this before I move on, like because everybody's trying to be a playmaker, that inherently means no one is, right? No one is looking for a leader because everyone's trying to be the leader. I don't know if they were doing that. Again, like I actually disagree with that. I'm kind of just arguing against what Jay said, but I don't think the wind chill were all trying to be playmakers. I just think no one really knew what to do. Um, and I think it hurt. But
There's a term, if you know what it means, it makes sense. It's called playing hyphy. It's when you did something really good and then you try to like you go hyperactive on it. You try to
yeah,
make the next thing also really cool. And that's what I felt like the wind chill was doing last night. They had a really great block and then they picked it up and tried to make a really great throw. And you don't
yeah,
need to make a really great throw right after a really great block. You need to make a really solid play after that. And I felt like the chill were doing that instead.
it's true. I will say too, and they did a great job at end of quarter situations. I didn't look at the actual numbers again, but I think they scored in at least two at the end of at least two quarters, if not all three. So they did a great job at kind of getting that free break, as we call it, kind of giving them that advantage, but again, it just wasn't quite enough. Didn't make up for the lack of breaks that they also were not getting. Um, I want to move on a little bit before we get to the clip, just about what this looks like in terms of league standings, Central Division standings. Um, Looking at the Central Division, this is going to be a crazy division this year. And this was kind of seen as a free win for the wind chill. Um, I think again, I think the Thunderbirds going into this game, we all kind of saw as weak. Um, we thought this was going to be pretty much a secure dub. And so with that in mind, we were like, okay, well, that's a win. That's a given. So now we can look at, the Summit. We can look at the Empire. We can look at all these other games that are going to be more important. But now that they have kind of an extra loss on their record, all these other games going forward are going to be even more critical to win. Like they basically can't lose against the Summit. They basically can't lose against the Alley Cats or the Union, right? Like how does this game now affect the rest of the season and the standings going forward?
All right. So before I get too deep into it, if Minnesota loses to either the Summit or the Empire, one of those two, and wins the other 9 or 8 games, they are guaranteed second place in the division.
They have to be at least the Summit or Empire.
They have to beat one of those two teams.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure if they beat neither of them but win out every other game, they're guaranteed at least third place because they do play Chicago twice more and they would have beaten Madison twice. And then the way the rest of the league works. So I'm pretty sure
Right.
they're guaranteed third place if they drop 2 more games. And I'm pretty sure they're actually still guaranteed third place as long as they don't lose to the Radicals or the Union.
Alley Cats.
Nope, the Union. Because if they lose to the
Oh,
Alley Cats would be the team who would be in second place.
gotcha. I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it feels a little like dramatic to be talking about this. It's the third game of the season, like they're a quarter of the way through their season. And like I don't want to be that Minnesota sports fan of like, oh well, the season's over, we're doomed. But again, like we have this in our mind of like that's a win, that's a win, that's a win. That's questionable. So those questionable games are the ones we're focusing on to win. So when you lose a game that's supposed to be won, that mixes stuff up. That can mess up some stuff. So, Shane, any thoughts on the division outlook before we move
Yeah,
on
I
to
was
the
just
clip?
gonna say on your last part there, going back to the podcast we recorded with Tucker this at the beginning of the season here, we all basically skipped this week. We
Mhm.
were like, all right, let's get on to the more exciting weeks. Next, we got Colorado, New York coming up. And that's exactly what this week was supposed to be. It was supposed to be, another stepping stone on the way to those bigger games. And so I don't know, I think a little bit of a stumble here, but still a good path ahead, even if it is maybe just a little bit rough now.
For sure. It just makes more games more exciting,
Yeah.
Like this Madison game coming up next week and every Union game is like they are must wins and that's exciting. So, okay, I'm going to share my screen really quick. For those listening on Spotify, we'll do our best to describe with our voices. If you're listening on YouTube, watch on YouTube, feel free to check out our screen. But we are going to share a clip. Wow, I do not know where the button is. It's nice bright green, but I still couldn't find it. Okay, so this actually talks about field positioning off the pole. We got a nice deep pole that rolls out to the back of the end zone. What we're going to see is a great double team. There's a lot of good handler pressure and cutter pressure, and it's going to result in a block by, again, Thomas Shope. So, again, just to preview what you're going to see here. So, it's a double team that Brandon Mattis almost gets.
He
Sorry,
was so bad.
yeah. I started this clip like a second later than I expected, so I thought I had more time. So, anyway, we're going to see the handlers of the Thunderbird handlers still move the disc around the end zone, like taunting the wind chill with the Callahan.
This is one thing I
There
like
is,
about the Windchill's handler defense that's really nice is, and it's kind of hard to like pick one example because it's kind of abstract how it works, but they'll float off of their guy that they're like okay, watch when Mattis is coming in, and then who's this on the bottom of the screen right there that your mouse is on? Is that
I don't know, I can't tell.
yeah, my
But
eyes are so bad. That's so funny. Okay, but like when they're cutting in on their handlers, they're or on the cutters, and then the handlers are moving around. They're kind of
mhm,
like floating like a little cloud around them to clog up the lane. And so instead of just playing strictly man, they're forcing Pittsburgh to have less field space. And so
yeah,
that obviously, forcing Pittsburgh to take more swing passes left and right. So
yeah, yeah, that's a good point. And then here's this big hook, and this is when Thomas Schulp, he's actually like kind of lagging behind. He does actually have the proper field positioning because he's got that inside route, and it ends up helping him. He's also just behind him. I don't know. I just think like that was just a great play that I think again exemplifies the Wind Chill's defense. There, it starts with that deep, the deep pull. Wow, double team, great handler defense, like Kane was saying, and then like it turns into a turnover. See if I can play it back just one more time. Um,
Because what if like for Pittsburgh, you got to imagine you're in your end zone, right? You're also thinking, we don't want to give Minnesota this Callahan here. We really can't get it. You're going back and forth for however many seconds they have it. You don't get a single under. Well, you see that little bit of a lead on your far
yep.
cut, and you're like, oh, I can take this one. And
Like Schultz almost
it's
like uh,
you
he
bait
didn't
it a little bit.
yeah, baited. That's what I was gonna say. Not snake in the grass, but yeah, he baited that. I think you're right.
Absolutely. And I think there's definitely some intention to that.
And I think
Yeah.
part of that is two things. One is knowing when your defender is that close, you can't leave a disc low. You can't, because then they're just going to lay out and block that anyway. So you have to put it up in air. But when you put a disc up in air, it gives it that second to float. So you need more of a gap to actually for that to be the case, for that to be more than just a 50-50. So this is what I was trying to say earlier when I said like Minnesota's defense was doing its job. I meant more of like that generating blocks, generating that pressure, getting those turns. It's when
Yeah.
they were playing on offense. So I meant like when Minnesota was on defense, they were doing their job. And they were just,
that's fair.
they were jumping up. They were getting those 50-50s. They were getting a lot of blocks. Raider had one called back on him where he made a fantastic block. I'm not sure why it was called back. I went back and watched the clip. The announcer said it was a call on the throw. It might have been a call before the throw was made that had happened. It wasn't on the actual throw itself. I think it was before the throw. But that's besides the point. He had an excellent block. So like the defense was playing very well.
Okay, league news. I want to get on to league news because we have the strike game to talk about as well. UFA League news was pretty exciting this weekend. Just kind of like where we're at. Again, now they're about a quarter of the way through the season. The Salt Lake Shred are the new undefeated team to watch. They are 5-0 after going, I think they played 2 this weekend, including one against the Summit. And so like the Shred, I think, again, we're kind of seeing what the win chill were like last season of like they've got that enticing championship weekend ahead of them. I think they're still like ballers on the field. Like they're just so good and they're showing that. And so super excited. Again, there's new kind of unofficial champion at the top right now until
It is a
the New
well-known
York.
fact that Winchell Talk is our Shred fans.
Until we play them.
Yeah,
of course.
Speaking of which, road teams this weekend in the UFA went 8-3. So again, the Shred took 2, Thunderbirds took 1, like right there. Road teams took the weekend. I think that's interesting.
Yeah. Speaking of road teams taking the weekend, though, that's good for us because the Hustle actually beat the Alley Cats at the Alley Cats. So that kind of gave us a cushion loss against the team.
Yeah.
Now if Minnesota beats the Alley Cats, they have a better record, essentially, instead of the Alley Cats also having that loss.
Right. That was kind of a must win for the Alley Cats. Not a must win, but like, especially in the context of Winchell losing this weekend, like if the Alley Cats won that, it would be a different storyline. So shout out to Cam Brock and the Alley Cats.
Thank you, Atlanta Hustle.
Cam Brock was kind of tweeting at us, not in a bad way. We were not like chirping at each other, but like we were conversing. So
no, we love Cam Brock.
Yeah,
Cam Brock is a good guy.
He's great sport. Also, league legend. I mean, he's been here in the league, doing some of the craziest things. So, Cam Brock, if you're listening, sign for the chill.
We'll get you on
come
temporarily.
On the pod.
Yeah. And then another just like league news shout out. We're actually hitting like all 4 divisions tonight. James Pollard of the Philadelphia Phoenix went off this weekend. He had 5 assists and nearly 1,000 total yards against DC. They ended up losing in overtime. I think they lost by 1 point. But James Pollard just did like video game stuff. He was just crazy. I don't know. I think that was super exciting to share. I saw that stat. I was like, that's just unbelievable.
So that's like awesome and really cool. But I was watching that game and they went into double overtime and lost 24-23. Cole Jurek actually had 9 as his plus minus, and Pollard only had an 8. So he, despite having like one of the best games of his career, Cole Jurek actually had a higher plus minus. I think Jurek had a a lot of must have had much more goals
Blocks or
because
something. Yeah.
something
Yeah.
because yeah, he's not on the assist numbers and not on the goals numbers. Oh yeah, he had six
That's
goals.
okay. Okay. Jeez.
Yeah.
I miss Cole Jurek
Yeah, so do I.
and Aroy, but it's
Um
fun. It's fun to look at the league and see just what else happened because a lot happened this weekend, including like the wind chill. We're not the only ones playing, and so that was a cool weekend to see. Speaking of the wind chill not being the only ones playing, the Minnesota Strike also played against the Raleigh Radiants in North Carolina. The Strike also lost, and they also lost by 1 point. No, or was it 2 points?
I'm pretty sure it was 15-17. I
15,
think it ended.
17.
I get you out of here. What was it?
It was
15-17.
15-17. Yep.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. But pretty close. Again, like what is there to even say? Actually, there's a lot more to say to this.
I think like initially, I don't feel weirdly enough, even though it was a 1 more point defeat, I don't feel as bad about this one just because again, I don't think it was as sloppy of a game as the Minnesota was on both sides of like both teams. I think in Minnesota Pittsburgh was sloppy, but I think the Strike game was just like it was a hard loss, but I don't think it was as difficult to swallow as a fan.
No, I agree. I mean, even just looking at the scores like we talked about last weekend previewing this matchup, like the Radiants had such huge blowouts against the teams they've beaten, and even then they lost, like they lost by a lot. So this being a 2 point game was like the closest game the Radiants have ever played this season. Um, so I think that's very impressive on the Strike to see they took them, yeah, like they put pressure on. Um, Kind of a fun stat that I want to share from that game is like the first 2 quarters, there was not a single break point. There were only holds, which is again very impressive. And like it was really, and there were a fair amount of turnovers. Like it wasn't like there were no chances. Like both teams were kind of like last night with the wind chill, were giving up the disc a lot. They weren't quite finding their rhythm necessarily, or there was like good defensive pressure and stuff. A lot of break opportunities, no breaks in the first half. So fun fact.
Yeah. I kind of want to I don't want to compare that strike, not really like the offenses or the turning the disc and getting it back. For Minnesota and Pittsburgh, it felt like they were kind of throwing the discs away or taking bad looks.
Mhm.
For Minnesota and Raleigh, it really felt like the O line was working hard to get the disc back. It felt
Yeah.
like they were putting in the hustle. This felt like a much cleaner, much more defined game. Um, and just going into the halftime, Minnesota scored at the end of both of the first 2 quarters. So
Mhm.
they generated that mini break. So they ended up 1 point ahead and they held that lead, again, 1 point lead into
Yep.
the third quarter at the end of third quarter. And I think Raleigh started with the discs. They scored last in the third quarter as well. Um, and then
Yeah.
yeah, fourth quarter, like going into the fourth quarter, I was so pumped. I was so like excited. And that was deflating. Not in like the worst way possible, but it was, man, Raleigh really stepped up their game.
They did. And like, especially at the end of the game, that's like not when you expect to step up, right? Like, maybe second or third quarter, but yeah, it definitely felt like, oh, the Strike can do this if they can just continue the pressure they've done. And if Radiance kind of keep like their tempo going, um, and just kind of turns the tides turned. Yeah, I think it was a great game. Talking about the wind chill or the Strikes offense. I texted you guys like I love watching the Strikes offense work. I think their handlers, again, kind of like last year in a different way, but similar to last year, how their handlers are so patient. Their handlers, again, especially today, it was so key when there are so many turnovers, so many break opportunities. And I think the Radiance's defense is really good at handler defense as well. Um, the handlers did a great job maneuvering in between that and finding open cutters. Like they had to work for it. And I was kind of in shock and awe. Like, this is why they're good. This is why the Strike can do what they're doing. So they don't just like take that deep look when they feel pressure. Like they use their stall count to their advantage. Their cutters get open and they take the swing or dump if they have to, and they start over.
Yeah, I think one thing that the strike handlers are really good about doing is utilizing whatever space is available that they're given for their handler movements is really easy when I said this the last 2 weeks here, but especially like Rachel Johnson is one I always like bring it out to because I think she's really, really good about taking that space that you give her and turning it into forward movement. So to your point about how like they are very good about, waiting on that and then taking the lateral movements, but when that time comes when they have to strike, they really do take that super well, and it allows their offense to like I really don't want to say strike again, but I can't think of a better word for
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah. Attack. Yeah. I mean, I think. Go ahead, Jay.
I was gonna say again, what Kane was basically picking up what Kane was saying. They don't really take swing passes or dump passes unless it's their like last second option. They
Right.
are always taking, or if they are, it's a forward pass. It's always like they're gaining 2, 3, 4, 5 yards, short passes, quick passes. And then when they're being patient, it's maybe 1 or 2 yards forward instead of those quick forward passes. It's still usually forward momentum.
And again, even like their cutter continuations almost act as like a reset. Like they're still cut. Like the upline cut gets that momentum going forward, and rather than like they get that stall reset and they're already open up because like they always get that break side pass. They find someone deep and they send it. Like I think they just have such a good flow on offense that
right,
again, like last year, everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing. And when the disc is on the left side of the field, or if Johnson then moves it up to Hoyer, like then my job is to cut deep or what, right? Like everyone has
right,
a rhythm to it.
right. How many times have we started on the left side of the field with the disc
You know?
and scored in like 3 throws on the right end zone, right?
Right.
How you like that continuation. And so that's one thing that I love when I play frisbee personally is I'm like, guys, we have a whole, 70 yards across. Let's use that whole thing. And a lot of times it's hard as a defender to defend the lateral space as well. So
That's a good point. Okay. Can I share my screen here? I think that's yeah. Okay. Um, Basically, again, everything we've been talking about, like there's a reason I'm sharing this clip, but there's just again great handler movement. We're gonna see. I think they actually kind of start at the top of the screen. They're on the left side of the field, and I don't know if they actually score in the right side of the end zone, but they move the disc very well. So just watch. I'm gonna hit play here. So again, just like Steph Wood actually has the disc now, passes it to Steph Rupp, and cuts up. Like watch Wood go up into the stack now and then cuts around again. Like that's what we were just talking about, like how there's already movement. She's in the backfield as a handler, almost like as a primary handler, and then goes into like that tertiary handler, like that third handler in the stack. You know what I mean? Who is like kind of like that
right.
backup. Um, and so now she has the disc midfield. Um,
But you can even
I
see
love
how
that. I love that fake out.
I love the big fake outs, especially when the defender will like dive for it and
Oh
just
yeah.
flop. Oh, it's great. But you can see how entering that stack and then immediately coming back out of it
Mhm.
allows for the rest of stack because like I'm maybe speculating on like the mental games here. If you're a defender on someone in the stack and you're like, oh, they just got the disc. That was like a weird first cut, and then allows the entire rest of the stack on offense to continue shifting down. Whereas the stack was set here and all the defenders were ready for the stack to be set here. Now all of a sudden the disc is here and the stack has moved down. And so I
Like
think it basically it allows the stack to like kickstart, I guess, almost. So the first
yeah,
cut can be deeper.
I think Steph Wood like disrupted what the defense wanted to do almost, and almost
Right.
disrupted what the offense was going to do, but positively, right? Like
Yes.
you said, yeah.
That's a much better way of putting it. Thank you.
And then she's just gonna launch it, I think, to Byers. I think that's Byers there. Again, it's kind of blurry. I think she ends up catching this disc, but she just launches it and just glides. And oh, that's actually not the goal. My bad. Okay, here's the goal to Ada Pollock. If I say that name right. Yeah. Again, I think that's just like such a great example of how this team operates. They swing the disc well. They as soon as Steph throws it to Steph, Wood to Rupp. She gets right into the stack and cuts right away. She's not stagnant.
Mhm.
Just
And you
watch
see how
that.
like the rest of the stack too. Okay, this is kind of my point here.
Mhm.
Like the rest of the stack recognizes the play and kind of like almost cancels what they were doing
Right.
and resets up the new play.
Right.
And so I guess that was more what I was calling out is the adaptability of the offense to take advantage of those plays when the handlers are kind of calling them. So
Yeah, for
Jeff,
sure.
can you watch this back in full speed? Just right quick so we can.
All right, let me hit playback speed. Normal. Here we go. Okay. I won't hit pause either. Great handler movement. I won't annotate too much, but I want to just kind of you just watch that stack. Byers goes and watch Anna Pollock in the midfield. Now she also follows that cut from Byers and then is patient and jumping. She wanted to jump too. You saw that, and she did
Mhm.
not for a second.
I feel that.
Yeah.
It was just above your head, and you're like, I can get it.
Yeah.
Like an excited puppy.
And
It's like,
No, no, you cannot get that.
I
I
think
know. Like,
I think that's why there were a lot of turns today too. Not like everyone's making bad decisions, but right, it like looked like, oh, I could almost get that or yeah. So I'm glad that they recognized that and made the
Yeah.
move.
yeah, I think overall the loss was I don't really know what to chalk it up to. I don't think it was a bad game by any
Mhm.
means. Um, but obviously, especially if fourth quarter obviously can make a huge difference. You know, you go into it with a 1 point lead, having the ability to hold on to that and to stymie a rally at home is a skill in of itself. And that's something that you obviously can't really practice for, is something that kind of has to happen. And so, especially for such a fresh team going on the road for the first time this season, I think that was a really, really good game.
Mhm.
And I wish it
Against a
was
tough, yeah,
yeah,
tough opponent.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
So the Strike are now at the halfway point of their season. They are 1-2. They've only won one game so far. Um, how do we feel about the Strike? What do we think their final record is going to be to this at this point in the season? To preview the second half of their season, they're at Philadelphia Surge on June 1st. June 2nd, they're at New York Gridlock. And then June 8th, they take on Indianapolis Red at home. So they got a tough double header weekend coming up in a couple weeks. And then hopefully at home, they can take on the Red. How do we feel?
Um, Honestly, look, I'm not a hater, but I think that doubleheader weekend is going to be tough. Those are two of the best teams in the league.
Yep.
Um, and two teams who have been playing this year. I'm pretty sure Gridlock was one of the undefeated teams
they
left.
are. They definitely
Uh,
are.
so that's definitely going to be a hard one, a
Yeah.
very hard one. Um, if they can muscle it out, and it's at New York as well, so that there's that on the road, and it's the second
Both
game
of
in
them
two
are.
days. Yeah, it's back to
Yeah.
back road games.
Yeah.
Thankfully, Philadelphia and New York are like actually not that far apart, like much closer than I always imagine.
Right.
But still, it's not easy playing back to back days when you have to travel in between. So I do think that there definitely will be a loss there. However, I think they'll be able to beat Indianapolis at home.
So do you think they'll be 3-3?
I think they'll end the season 3-3. I
Okay.
know, optimistically rooting for 4-3 or 4-2, but
Yeah, the super fan in me is screaming 4-2. Um, it's hard to find fault with that line of reasoning though. I do think the Philly game we can take. Uh, Obviously the doubts from the New York game don't come from the doubts of the team, but again, this is the road trip, so it's like
Mhm.
I can
That's
see a
tough.
loss there. But no, you know what? I'm gonna say 4-2. They're
Yeah.
done losing.
Yeah, and I don't remember how the PULs. I know they've kind of been changing their championship weekend style, and they changed the divisions this year, so it's different divisions and everything. So I'll be honest, I'm not brushed up on that, but I don't know if a 3-3 record is going to be good enough to get into championship weekend, or it's going to be tight. It'll come down to like point differential or something. So they basically have to go undefeated the rest of the season if they want to, see the postseason. So yeah, like they know it. Like we don't have to be the ones telling them like they're taking this off week. They've got to buy this week and they're going to take that. They're going to rest and relax these next couple of days and then they're going to hit the ground running with a lot of film, a lot of, probably chemistry practice. And um, yeah, let's go strike like 4-2. Let's get to championship weekend again because I love last year's team and I love this year's team.
Yeah, that was a tough loss. I don't know. It was disappointing. I was like, yeah, it's kind of like one of those just like gut dropping, like, dang,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I thought they had it. I really did.
it was a good game.
Yeah.
But two unfortunate losses on the weekend. We're all still fans, though, obviously.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I just pulled it up for PUL Championship weekend, just to get it out there. It's the two top teams from both divisions.
Well,
by
that makes
record.
sense. Yeah,
By record.
Duh. Because there's only two divisions.
Yep.
Oh.
So 4-2 would be, I think, the minimum they could get for the rest of the
with
season.
New York Gridlock and Philly Surge, assuming they're both undefeated.
Those are the games this weekend, guys.
Yep.
Oh,
so they
crap.
have to win both of them.
Yeah,
and then also close out against the Red.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
No pressure.
Here we go. Here we are. Yeah. I mean, I think, like I said, like this technically an unprecedented podcast for Winchell Talk, covering two losses. But like here we are. This is why we're not here just for the sunshine and rainbows and rah rah rah. Our teams are great. Like they are great, but like they're gonna lose, and here we are. I want to move on to mailbag. So really quickly, we did not. We touched on both of these. This will be a 2-minute segment today. We did not get any mailbag questions this week because I think we sent it out too late and like we're still trying to find a rhythm. So be patient with us. Send in a mailbag how we should do our mailbag. We're trying to record on Tuesdays, but schedules don't line up yet, but we're working on it. So anyway, 2 questions I want to touch on in mailbag this week. And we've basically talked about both of them. The Strike are now halfway done with their season. How do you think they'll finish? Realistically, again, if we're talking realism, I'm gonna say 5-1. Like, I think maybe 4 or not 5-1. That's impossible. 4-2 is what I meant to say. They're gonna go back in time.
Jeff's still rooting for them to win today, even after they already lost.
They can do it. I know they can.
We're gonna beat New York so hard. They're gonna give us another win.
Hey, if they're double the score. Yeah, I think 4-2 is a realistic. It's realistic and optimistic, and so I'm going to go with that route. And again, hopefully that'll be enough for championship weekend, but it's going to be tough.
I'm really hoping for 4-2, but I think it's more realistic that they drop one of those doubleheader weekend games. Doubleheader weekends are really hard. Please prove me wrong. Please go 4-2.
Yeah, you had me at 5-1. I'm convinced. Next question.
All right. Okay, and then this other one, both questions kind of talk about playoff pictures for the Winchell. Of the remaining 9 games left in the Winchell schedule, how many can they lose and still make playoffs? So again, even mathematically speaking, like we can actually calculate that out, I know, but like qualitatively, how many more games can the Winchell lose and still make the playoffs? I think I'm going to put it out there. Kane says 0. Tell me more, Kane.
All right. I think that momentum shift with the Pittsburgh win is real. I think Pittsburgh is good enough to beat a team like Madison or Chicago. And while that may not necessarily mean that we're fighting Pittsburgh for the playoffs, it means that a lot of teams are going to be fighting for a spot in the playoffs. And so that means that, any loss against a divisional matchup is really bad. And so we can't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the divisional matches are increasingly more important, and the out of division matches are almost must wins because they don't affect the opponent's loss. So I'm gonna say they can only lose 2, but probably even 1. I think they have to go 10-2, but I think they could eke in that 3rd spot at 9-3. I think if they lose 4 or more, see you next year, kind of. But again, not to be a doomsayer, and like it's only their first loss of the season, but it was a big one, a big unexpected one.
Okay, so mathematically speaking,
Yeah.
3 if they lose to the Summit, if they lose to the Empire, and I think also if they have to drop the 1 to Mechanics. I think mathematically that would guarantee them a spot still. That is not the outcome you want, but I think
If we
mathematically,
lose to the Mechanics, they can have our spot.
just because of how many times the Union play the Radicals and the Radicals play Pittsburgh and things like that. The Radicals have already played Pittsburgh, and then the Alley Cats as well. So I think like mathematically an 8-4 record will be good enough to at least guarantee a tie break against Pittsburgh, or if we outscore the Radicals this game, at least outscore to guarantee a tie break. But yeah, I think realistically 2 at
Yep.
most.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, talk about Madison then. We're going to weekly forecast. Like I said, the Strike have a bye week, a much needed rest. The Minnesota Wind Chill have their first Super Series game. The UFA are doing these regular Super Series matchups against some of the best division rivals, the best matchups of the season. So the Wind Chill are traveling to Madison, Wisconsin on Friday night to play them. Border battle's always fun. Again, we've talked about in past episodes, like these games are always really close. Again, now coming off, the context of the Thunderbirds game, like this game could be even closer. This game could mean even more. Um, what else do you want to preview for this game? I've got a couple other previews, but
Nothing, go for it.
yeah. Okay, so really I only have one. I mean, not really. So players to watch, or rather just players in general. Last week we knew that we didn't have any throwers, basically, like we said. We know Josh Clayton is out of town. Sam Berglund is listed as questionable right now. It's again Sunday night, so this is early in the week. We do have permission to say he's questionable with some injuries, ankle and wrist injuries. And again, Will Brandt this weekend has been popping off. Go watch all of our Instagram highlights or watch he's with St. Olaf right now, just going nuts with Gordon Larson too. Again, I don't follow college sports, any sport. I think this is kind of their what's it called? Hurrah championships. This is so bad. But so hopefully we have Will Brandt back. I need to do better research. It's been a long weekend, you guys. Basically, again, what I'm saying is they need throwers. They're going to be without probably their best O line and best D line thrower. So they can't use that as an excuse. They've got to fill in and find these playmakers, get the disc into the hands of someone who can throw and beat Madison at Madison, which is notoriously hard.
Yeah, I do want to see 2 things to watch for this weekend. Tristan Manny Mortel had a not stellar game against Pittsburgh on Saturday, and I do think that that's going to drive him to do well against Madison. From what we've seen, Tristan Manny Mortel does not have 2 bad games back to back.
Yeah.
He doesn't. He's had bad games, and the next game he shows up and shows out. So I think that he will be definitely a player to be watching this weekend. And if Redder is going to be there, Redder will also be one to watch. He currently leads the team in goals. I think he actually currently leads the team in blocks as well, like you were talking about earlier. He is doing amazing. He is having a highlight performance. He may be this year's MVP for the team.
Yeah.
Early season MVP.
Yeah, for sure.
So I
At
think
least the
if
first quarter, but
yeah, if we're predicting things to watch this week, I'm saying those 2 are going to be the 2 to watch.
yeah, I think that's great. And again, if Will Brandt is back, I'd say watch for the hog. All right. Well, I think that's it. Unless anyone else has any last thoughts. This is great. This is again a tough episode to have to record, but that's what we're in that business. So we appreciate everyone listening. Followed along through the highs and lows of the seasons. We appreciate the R1P1 network once again coming in clutch with our thumbnails, our Zoom backgrounds, all of our artwork. They've been pushing out some cool content and stuff. So go give them some love. Follow them on Instagram and everything. And we will see you. I don't know. I want to make the trip to Madison, but as of right now, I might be the only one going. So I don't know if I'll be there. But if not, I'll see you at Seafoam Stadium once again against the Colorado Summit for that matchup, that rematch. That's going to be a fun game. So in the meantime, stay chilly and ka-chow.
Stay chilly. Ka-chow.
Ciao, stay chilly.